Good morning, everyone. Today we're checking out a brand new video from the GojiCenter about can Skull Island survive Primal's zombie sauropod. Now, if y'all have never seen the show Primal, Season 1, Episode 7, Plague of Madness, we're introduced to a plague that seems to cause madness-like symptoms, but it appears highly more likely to be some kind of zombie infection. And because whoever is bitten by it, and while their skin turns green, they just start producing excess fluids, vomiting blood, and eventually high aggression against, well, everything they can see. But the strange thing about it is there could only be one infected, and only that one. And even if it bit another and ran off, only that one that was primarily infected would remain. So now let's move over to Skull Island and see what would happen if we drop this on it. Kong?
What if
What's up?
Primal's mad sauropod made landfall in Skull Island? Would this place survive? In today's episode of GojiCenter, we're warping space and time to transport one of the most monstrous zombies in fiction onto the island of the Skull. Will the possessed sauropod become the plague-bearing horseman of the apocalypse to Kong's kingdom? Or will the island that endured the horrors of prolonged extinction weather the raging storm? This is Gendy Tartakovsky's Primal Argentinosaurus rampage through the island of death. Skull Island, a place that has been depicted with numerous incarnations over the decades, from the dinosaur-filled lost world of the 30s, to halfway empty and halfway snake-infested misty forests in the 70s, to the hollow earth brought to the surface in miniature from the Monsterverse. The version from the Peter Jackson-led adaptation of King Kong from 2005 is one equally near and dear to many hearts, and the source of utter nightmare fuel even more. As shown in the movie and expanded upon in the Natural History of Skull Island companion book, this landmass has been ripped apart by tectonic activity and is gradually sinking. One extinction event after another has pushed life to the brink, and the environment itself is as much a hazard as the crowded species, with sheer
So Skull Island is literally shrinking and dying. Damn.
Cliffs and deep crevices being abundant. Every species here has had to try and cope with the extreme environment, and a never-ending cycle of death permeating every ecosystem. Evolved dinosaurs, giant apes, and rapacious arthropods. Everything is already living on a knife's edge. Today's special guest will put that.
Quick question though. Was he saying a nice edge or a knife edge? I know, it was knife edge, I'm just saying. Pronunciation.
The ultimate test. Today's simulation will take place several years before the events of the 2005 movie, and we will be dropping in quite possibly the most powerful and destructive creature to ever set foot on the island, a mad Argentinosaurus. This adjective is honestly an understatement. As a refresher for anyone who didn't watch Primal, side note, please do. It's easily one of the better pieces of animation to come out in recent years and had a master at the helm. The rage infection is not just a mere virus. Initially carried by a heavily decayed hadrosaur, the infection was spread with a bite into the leg of possibly the most devastating host it could have wound up in. A fully grown, over 100-ton Argentinosaurus. Standing over 16 meters, 52 feet tall, and being well over 36 meters, 118 feet long, this sauropod is possibly the most powerful creature to ever walk the earth. And the plague of madness takes everything potent about it to a level impossible in nature. After being infected and showing signs of rapid decay, dizziness, and mass vomiting of blood,
not even actually kidding you, it happened that fast in the show. Like one bite, not even 5 minutes later, fully transformed. And the main way of seeing if something is transformed, the eyes.
Which was flipped, turning this peaceful herbivore into a rampaging monstrosity. It's worth noting that although this plague of madness spreads like a disease, the speed that it works, the effects it has on the body, and the kind of setting it comes from heavily imply this is not a normal virus, but some kind of dark magic, a supernatural affliction. This is more of a curse than a traditional plague. We are talking about the same world that has demons, witches, and debatably werebeasts. Night Feeder, after all. This caveat will be especially relevant later. After the affliction, the Argentinosaurus displayed supernatural levels of resilience, strength, speed, and perseverance. Its jaw power became strong enough to tear through other dinosaurs. All of the blows it let loose with stomping feet and swinging tail had manic strength behind them that easily killed non-infected Argentinosaurus in just a few hits. And it was capable of sprinting and even jumping with enough speed and agility to keep pace with the pretty nimble spear.
Oh yeah, one thing they kind of point out, an Argentinosaurus is so big, it biologically cannot jump. So the fact this thing did jump can tell you what the fuck happened.
And Fang. Note that these feats are not possible in a scenario where real, more grounded physics are at play. Never in the history of Earth has anything this heavy been able to move like this. Which then suggests that this plague, apart from taking control of the unlucky big guy, also makes this fella push the limitations of its physical body far beyond what they should. Moving in this manner, biting this hard, putting this much strain on its muscles, bones, and ligaments damaged this creature greatly. And it couldn't have been more clear. The reason this animal still moved around regardless of the damage it inflicted on themselves was likely due to an effect that numbed most of its pain receptors. After this plague took over its nervous system, it's likely that the sensors, known as nociceptors, were affected to some degree. This would be the equivalent of you pulling your leg muscle while running, but instead of stopping, you just keep running and damaging it further without feeling any pain. Same happens here. This was one of the reasons why nothing the dynamic pair of adventurers were capable of could even slow down the rampaging sauropod, and they didn't even bother trying. Getting parts of its body sheared off by the walls of the ravine to the point bones were showing, and brief dunkings in lava failed to debilitate this titan. Only prolonged burning finally brought it down and put an end to that nightmare. And only for us to just pick up that nightmare and put it somewhere else. If an Argentinosaurus were to live on this island, it would likely be on the open plains where the other large herbivores thrive. Here is where we'll unleash the sauropod with the plague.
Let it begin.
A lone, powerful giant, and now a demon possessed by a tower of pestilence, the Argentinosaurus will now begin its rampage. Driven by a force that drives the host to kill anything with a pulse, the surrounding animals will likely sense something off, developing inside their new neighbor. In Primal, the aftermath of the Argentino's rampage set off instinctive alarms to every creature it encountered. Fang reactively avoided the corpses of its victims, and not even flies were attracted to the carrion. Now, it's a common trope in fiction that animals can sense the supernatural, and whether it's this or some other element at play, any creature that sees or detects the sauropod will have only one thing on their mind: run. Now, since we're on the open plains, we have to talk about the big inhabitants, and likely the Argentinos' once neighbors, the Brontosaurus. These guys were seen to go into panic mode by not even the biggest threats on the island. This fella, unlike anything they have ever seen, the first Brontosaurus that falls victim to the massive Argentinosaurus sets off a chain reaction of fear and panic that causes the whole open valley to tremble. The already endangered sauropod population on the island would rapidly start dwindling regardless of whether any Brontos tried to fight back or scatter, and their predators wouldn't do any better. The Statosaurus rex might have the capability of hunting sauropods as an opportunity in a pack, but this would definitely be a case of where the hunter became the hunted. And with the Argentinosaurus more than big enough to start plowing through the forest after them, and not caring about how much the breaking of trees might damage its body, it would work to rapidly chase them down for slaughter too. The various ceratopsians and hadrosaurs wouldn't have any more luck getting away or fighting back, but the only saving grace being all of them scattering in different directions might buy them some time before the afflicted sauropod inevitably comes across them again. Smaller carnivores and aerial predators that can keep to the sky would have to stay out of the way too, while being pushed more and more out of any ecosystem they might inhabit by all the corpses left behind in the rampage. They don't want to be anywhere near anything to do with the Argentinosaurus, meaning the whole of the resident ecosystem might get upended with the inhabitants either killed or left scattered out of what home ranges they once had, which they now perceive as death zones. The Venatosaurus packs may be quick enough to avoid the Argentinosaurus or try to scale up sheer cliffs to reach the only safe havens. Now, could this Argentinosaurus unwittingly become the horseman of plague as well as death in this apocalyptic event? Maybe.
Possibly.
This is where it gets a bit debatable as to how exactly this affliction works. Either A, the curse can be transmitted with just a bite or infected tissue, meaning it can become viral and affect multiple hosts. B, the curse can be transmitted, but only with a bite. The number of cursed can grow regardless of how many of the afflicted currently exist. Or, the curse can only affect one host at a time and can only be spread by attack, not like a disease.
Yeah,
the
there you
show
go.
doesn't really clarify which is the case. The slain victims of
It seems to be more so the third option.
the Argentinosaurus didn't rise from the dead, and the initially infected Hadrosaur didn't get back up after getting struck down by the Sauropod. So it does seem like the curse needs a living host to function. If we go with the first option, Skull Island is automatically doomed. If by some
Pretty
miracle
much.
the infected sauropod was destroyed,
Right.
its constantly shedding tissues would pollute the ecosystem. And with how densely populated Skull Island is with a myriad of creatures across every environment, there would constantly be a new stream of infected hosts running rampant and murdering everything
It'd be
in sight.
everywhere.
However, we have reason to believe the second or third possibility might be closer to reality. Perhaps the affliction can affect multiple individuals at once, but it seems like it must be transmitted by a bite. This would explain why there wasn't an already infected horde of these things by the time the Hadrosaur stumbled upon the Argentinosaurus. It just didn't have time or ability to infect more. Now, whether more than one cursed individual can exist at a time might be almost impossible to determine just watching the show.
Yeah, we
The
still have no
Argentinosaurus
idea.
was so gargantuanly powerful that it was instantly killing anything it managed to attack, including anything equally as big. Maybe it could curse creatures that got away from it after being mauled, but with how monstrously powerful it is, and how determined it is to kill whatever it sets out to follow, it's not gonna leave any survivors to start this whole thing over again. A potential epidemic carrier or not, the Argentinosaurus would continue its rampage across the island. Virtually any herd or pack of animals it might encounter might have their life expectancy measured in seconds if they don't run away. Trying to stay and fight would be suicidal, so survival might be measured more in distance and how long the rampaging sauropod would be distracted killing somebody else.
Yeah, just get the hell away from
Bringer
it.
of death brings doom in many forms. Even without directly killing some victims, plenty of animals would start perishing to the point of risking dying out because of how the rampaging Argentinosaurus could severely damage local ecosystems, with animals avoiding it and its victims like the plague spilling into other habitats and crowding out other species. A lot of animals are going to start dropping from conflicts over space and resources, potential starvation, injuries from fleeing, or native diseases spreading across different species at a more rapid rate than normal. The only zones
Blasphemous.
relatively safe from the Argentinosaurus wandering into them might be the highlands and sheer cliffs. Even with its speed and surprising jumping ability, this Argentinosaurus wouldn't be able to scale a vertical incline, so some of the mountainous and flying species might be spared most of the rampage, trapped in their shelters seeing the carnage going on down below. With the
They'd be the
dinosaur
lucky
population
ones.
severely threatened, what of those who arrived on the island much more recently? Either noticing the localized extinction and migration of various dinosaurs, or spotting the cursed cause of the chaotic carnage themselves, the human village might inevitably become aware of what monstrosity had been let loose on their island.
Oh god,
and
there
with
it is.
them worshipping the island, seeing it as their god and its king as a divine avatar, they would perhaps inevitably begin a prayer and ceremony to try and cure this malady. Unfortunately for them, this might be one of the few dinosaurian menaces their walls may not save them from.
Not
The
even
mad
close.
Sauropod continues to plow through the jungles, crushing any lesser victims it stumbles upon. However, being possibly the tallest living creature in this island gives it the ability to see further targets, and a curious set of structures and glowing objects captures its attention. And upon figuring out the humans are just beyond that wall, the Argentinosaurus might be capable of launching itself across the gap. And depending on how
Oh,
sturdy that
God.
wall is, or if it tried to throw itself at the gate, it might wind up busting into the village. From there, the slaughter would begin, with the Argentinosaurus effectively
Head-on
going on a
death.
kaiju rampage. Humans might join the endangered species list on the island within an hour. Survivors would have to hide in the underground catacombs and pray there wouldn't be any cave-ins. Anyone seeking shelter on the walls would get munched to bits. All the noise and commotion, however, mixed with any prior summoning rituals, might just draw in the other apex of the island. King Kong could arrive at his usual altar and see what was going on. A thinking animal, he'd be left to choose on how he reacts. So, how might the pinnacle of primates stack up against this rampaging monstrosity? Well, if this was the MonsterVerse version, the heroic ape titan would certainly intervene. But this is a completely different Kong, in a completely different context. The dynamic between the Skull Islanders and the greatest of the great apes is less one of friendship and more fearful worship, mixed with Kong being a social primate looking for any kind of companionship out of curiosity. Upon seeing and sensing what monstrosity towers over the walls, King Kong would react like any sensible animal would to the cursed abomination. This is not the fight he needs. He would just stay out of this, and rightly so. Even the Brontosaurus outclassed the great apes in terms of mass. Argentinosaurus, more so. And worse, since this bizarre sight of a sauropod can snap back. But, unfortunately for the last of the mega primates, the Berserk Rage may not be keen to let him get away. What would follow would be less of a fight and more a desperate struggle for survival. King Kong using all his experience, agility, and speed to try and keep out of reach of the unstoppable force chasing after him. He might attempt to use some weapons or projectiles against the raging sauropod, but nothing he could throw at the Argentinosaurus would be hefty enough to debilitate. The Argentinosaurus would be a freight train of death constantly pursuing him. But the big ape might have just enough agility and speed to keep ahead of the cursed dinosaur, especially if he leverages his superb climbing ability to get around large trees and rocky slopes to use as obstacles. The curse needs a living host to be active and causes rapid decay on the creature it had afflicted. There might not be any large volcanic fields to make use of nearby, but that rot, combined with constantly bashing against rocky slopes and large trees, might start to wear down the sauropod. So, time may be this sauropod's worst enemy. That said though, any slip-up Kong has would result in near instant death. But if he uses his experience ruling over the island for as long as he has, the ape might have an idea. This King Kong might not be as much of a tool user as his later counterpart, but he is well experienced at using the environment to his advantage, as we saw in the fight against the triple Tyrannosaur triple threat, and as a means of getting rid of pesky humans. The sheer size and power of the Argentinosaurus is the exact reason he couldn't fight it. And on most islands with flatter terrain, King Kong might have no chance. But on this dying island, constantly getting ripped apart by earthquakes that tore trenches into it down to the foundation, the island's king might have just one chance. If he could goad the Argentinosaurus into chasing him near a cliff or chasm, large insect inhabited or not, the raging monstrosity wouldn't have the faculties to realize what was happening until it was too late. If it chased...
No, that actually is good. Get it to jump into one of the canyons filled with the insects, and insects will swarm it. There'll be more than enough numbers.
King Kong to the cliff's edge, or tried to get over a chasm. Its sheer size would shatter the rocky slopes and send it hurtling to terra firma. With its body already shredded by the terrain, over 100 tons of dinosaur would plummet straight down. And if the sheer impact didn't shatter its body completely, the steep cliffs would ensure the dinosaur's cursed existence would remain trapped. Can't climb out, especially not with shattered legs or spine. At that point, if it survived the fall, it would just be a waiting game until the rot and decay rendered the Argentinosaurus immobile. With the curse putting off scavengers, nothing might stick around to be a new host for the curse to spread to them after being bitten. This would be a Hail Mary shot of a victory, one that could go wrong in countless ways. And even on this island of death, just a few days of a rampage by the Argentinosaurus might have already upended the fragile ecosystem so much that it would speed up the extinction of numerous species. And if the island's king did manage to successfully trap it, if it so much as nips and doesn't kill a single creature that doesn't get out of the way, or worse, Kong suffered a non-lethal bite wound, then the Primal Rage may not end here until the whole of the island is bathed in blood.
That would be so cool and yet so disastrous as well. Alright everyone, that's going to be the end of today's video, and I hope you all enjoyed. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link to the original will be in the description below, and I'll see all of you next time when we flick back on. Till then, this is Fox, signing out. Peace.